Well, Cheryl and I are very happy to be able to be here with you, brothers and sisters, this week. If I haven't said hello to you yet, hello. We'll get a chance to chat maybe for a bit after the meeting as well. But we just came from the Woodlands congregation, and I think a lot of you are familiar with the brothers and sisters up there, and they're doing well and carrying on in their ministry as well, so they wanted to make sure that we said hello to you, brothers and sisters. So I want to pass that on to you. Cheryl and I are particularly happy to be here this week because having spent some time on the records, it's a real joy to be able to say that your congregation has had a busy 6 months. Your field service is up. Your return visits are up. Your Bible studies have stayed about the same, which is good. They're not going down. Magazines are up. So it's excellent to see, brothers, that a lot of you are really putting in a fine effort. All of you are putting in an excellent effort in order to support the kingdom. So you got to feel good about that. And was it 6 or was it 8 auxiliary pioneers? 6? 6? You add that to the number, and it's a busy congregation. So we're glad we're here to be able to be a part of December with you. I have a question for you, though. How do you react when someone says to you, "You know who you remind me of?" Some people go, "No, who?" Because they're really excited to find out who it is that you think they're like. Other people go, "No, who?" Because they've been unfavorably compared with someone. And so they're not all that anxious to find out. So what do you do when someone says that to you? In fact, when I think of you, brothers, do you know who you remind me of? You remind me of Jonah. Oh, now you're going, "Oh, no, not Jonah." You mean the guy who ran away from his assignment, got dumped into the ocean and all that. Yeah. But if you think of Jonah simply as someone who was a coward who ran away from his assignment, you might be surprised to know that there's much more about him that you may not have considered, and you may not find so dislikeful. Is that a word? Dislikeful? So distasteful, thank you. Yeah. Dislikeful. I got to have that one written down. Yeah. In fact, if you want to find out a little bit about him, why don't you turn to Jonah chapter 1. And while you're turning there, that book, which is a little bit of a challenge to find, I'm just going to tell you something about the name Jonah. The name Jonah means dove. Now, we don't know if Jonah, his name was given to him because of his being dove-like. You know what a dove's like? A dove tends to be soft and gentle in appearance and disposition, doesn't it? And maybe Jonah was like that because it was common in those days to use names that reflected some personality or some other characteristic about the individual. So if Jonah was a dove, as his name represents, then you might have found Jonah the sort of fellow who wasn't likely to push himself to the forefront. He might have kind of stayed in the background a bit, or maybe right at the back. And isn't that like a lot of us? I mean, most of us don't want to be someone who's right out in the front. They say, "Oh, look at me." Most of us aren't like that. We're individuals who like to be in the middle somewhere, or maybe right at the back where people tend not to notice us too much. So we could be like Jonah in that respect, couldn't we? Now, have you found Jonah chapter 1? Let's start reading there in verse 1. It says, "And the word of Jehovah began to occur to Jonah the son of Amittai, saying, Get up, go to Nineveh, the great city, and proclaim against her that her badness has come up for me. And Jonah proceeded to get up and run away to Tarshish from before Jehovah. And he finally came down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid its fare and went down into it in order to go with them to Tarshish from before Jehovah." Why do you suppose it was that Jonah all of a sudden was so afraid and took off and went wanted to go 2,200 miles the other way? What was the matter with him? Was he a coward? I mean, being afraid all of a sudden seems a little out of character because he already had an assignment there in Israel. He was preaching or was a prophet during the time of Jeroboam II. And Jeroboam II, he was a lot like his great-grandfather, Jeroboam I. He promoted idolatrous worship. He'd also been very successful in his military campaigns, and he'd managed to annex Damascus and Hamath, and they were now paying tribute to the nation. And so there was lots of money coming in, and there were building projects going on, and there was prosperity. And of course, with prosperity, you know what happens. Got to find ways to spend it and things to do. So they were busy in their own pursuits and idolatrous as well. So now Jonah comes along, and he's this dove-like personality, but he's out there doing Jehovah's work nonetheless. And he comes and he tells these people, look, Jehovah is going to bring destruction on you if you don't listen. And you can just hear them saying, oh, Jonah, why don't you just go away and go do that somewhere else? So it was a tough assignment. People weren't paying much attention to him. So when Jehovah said, get up, go to Nineveh, you might have thought, well, hey, a change of assignment, that sounds like a good plan. But he ran away. Was it because he was a coward? Well, some think so. Or was it just that Jonah forgot something? Did he forget something? Yeah, he did. You know what he forgot? Well, he forgot what it says in Hebrews chapter 13. Keep your finger in Jonah because we're going to come back there. But turn to Hebrews chapter 13. And let's look together at verse 20 and 21. It says, now may the God of peace, who brought up from the dead the great shepherd of the sheep with the blood of an everlasting covenant, our Lord Jesus, equip you with every good thing to do his will. So isn't that interesting? What did Jonah forget? Well, he forgot that when Jehovah gives us an assignment, he never abandons us to it. He doesn't just leave us alone and say, okay, there it is, go do it. But he supplies us what we need to accomplish it, whether it's his spirit or whether it's the skills needed in order to do that. And see, Jonah wasn't so much a coward as he just forgot. This assignment kind of scared him a bit. And maybe it's because of what Nineveh represented. Did you know that Nineveh was called the city of bloodshed? So that might have been part of it. Might have got him scared a bit because I guess in Nineveh, if they didn't like you, they might cut off your fingers or gouge out your eyes just to let you know that they weren't happy with you. Very, very violent and aggressive people. So that may have had something to do with it. But nonetheless, he forgot that Jehovah was giving him an assignment and would help him to carry it through. But you know, Jonah running away was not typical of the kind of person that he was. If you look again down to verse 7 of chapter 1, look at what it tells us. Remember, he gets on this ship, and there's a big storm that comes up, and he's down in the hold sleeping, and the captain comes down and wakes him up and says, look, you know, we're all going to die. He gets him up onto the deck of the ship, and in verse 7, it says, and they began to say to one another, come and let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account we have this calamity. And they kept casting lots, and finally the lot fell upon Jonah. So they said to him, do tell us, please, on whose account is it that we're having this calamity? What is your work, and from where do you come? What is your country, and from which people are you? At that he said to them, I'm a Sidonian. No, he didn't say that, did he? He says, I'm a Hebrew, and Jehovah, the God of the heavens, I am fearing, the one who made the sea and the dry land. And the men began to fear greatly, and they went on to say to him, what is this you have done? For the men had come to know that it was from before Jehovah that he was running away, because he had told them. So that kind of dispels the whole idea that Jonah was a coward. I mean, here he was. These guys are saying, okay, the lot's fallen on you, Jonah. What's the deal here? What's going on? And Jonah could have said, I don't know. Don't know anything about it. But he didn't. You see, he was brave. And he said, well, you know, it's because of me that this is happening. And it's Jehovah who's causing it to happen. That was a very brave thing to do, wasn't it? In fact, if you go on in verse 11, he says, or they say, what should we do to you in order that the sea may become still for us? For the sea was continually growing more tempestuous. So he said to them, lift me up and hurl me into the sea, and the sea will become still for you, because I am aware that it is on my account that this great tempest is upon you. What did he just do? He said, throw me overboard. Did he think he was going to survive being thrown overboard in the middle of the ocean? I don't think so. See, he was willing to give his life for those men. That was a very, very brave thing to do. Jonah was not a coward. Does that make you feel a little better about being compared to him? Yeah. And you know, today, Jehovah too has helped us. He's told us to get up and go to Nineveh, you might say. You know, he said, get up, go out, talk to people in the street, go to the business places, use the telephone, find the different ways to get in touch with people. And you know, we might be saying, well, what if they cut off my fingers or gouge out my eyes? Well, of course, we know they won't do that. But we sometimes fear these new areas that we haven't gone into or haven't become as familiar with yet as we should. But you know, just like Jonah, sometimes we just forget, don't we? That Jehovah said that he would equip us with every good thing to do his will. And that means that he won't never give us an assignment and simply abandon us to it. But he'll help us to be able to accomplish that. And so there's a number of things this week that we want to try to accomplish and to continue to accomplish into the future. For example, when it comes to being courageous and spending time in the ministry, do you know when the most productive time for the ministry is on Saturday? Do you know when it is? About 11:30 to 1:30 on Saturday. Working through the lunch period. That's the most productive time. And, you know, many of us yet probably haven't got much involved in telephone witnessing. Are you able to talk to people on the street yet? Do you feel comfortable with that? You see, remember, Jehovah equips us with every good thing to do his will. One sister said, you know, I'm really a very shy, reserved person. In fact, I find it most difficult to speak up about the truth when the opportunity arises. Oh, I was encouraged to try other avenues of service, and I knew I had to try, so I prayed to Jehovah about my concerns and decided to get on with it. But I was still nervous and continued to hold back, and this bothered my conscience. So, one day on a bus, she smiled at a lady beside her and started a conversation. She never talked to her about the truth that day, but the next day she saw her again and placed a track with her. Now she was underway. So a week later, she comes back, she finds the lady at the bus stop again. The lady says, well, where are you going? And the sister says, well, I'm going on a Bible study. And wouldn't you believe it? She says, could I go? And she did. And the Bible study was started with her too. So the sister was happy that she took the opportunity to talk to her. You know, a sister recently approached me to make arrangements for field service, and because she's a newer publisher, I asked her how she was doing with her ministry, and she said, you know, not so good. And I said, why? She said, well, you know, I'm more nervous now than I was when I started. Well, how come? She says, well, I think I figured it out. The other day, some sisters invited me to do telephone witnessing. You know, we talked to so many people, and when we were all done, I felt so good. I realized that when I go out in service, I hardly get to talk to people. So I know the secret. I need to talk to people. And so Jehovah seems to know what we need. You see, he knows in order to fulfill what he wants to accomplish, we have to talk to people on the streets, and we have to talk to people by telephone, and we have to call at their business places. It's almost like Jehovah knew what he was doing. But you know what? We also need that. We need to talk to people in our ministry. And of course, remember, the God of peace will equip you with every good thing to do his will, so we can be sure that he'll help us out to accomplish that. Well, you know, we're an awful lot like Jonah in another very important way. Do you remember what it said there in Jonah chapter 1 and verse 8? Just look back there for a moment. So they said to him, do tell us, please, on whose account is it that we are having this calamity? What is your work, and from where do you come? What is your country, and from which people are you? And you remember, he owned up to that, didn't he? Yeah, he was courageous. We're like that too. We're actually very courageous people. Have you ever had that happen to you? Somebody comes along at school or at work and goes, "Oh, I never knew that. Are you really one of Jehovah's Witnesses? Are you really?" And what did you do? You bet. I am. And you owned up to it, and you talked to them, and you were proud of it, because we're proud to be Jehovah's Witnesses. But that's a very brave thing to do, isn't it? Some of us, when we came in the truth, had to face our relatives. Maybe that happened to you. One 17-year-old sister in our circuit, she began to look into the Bible at the age of 17. Her parents said, "If you're going to continue on with this, out the door." So she left. A couple of weeks later, her parents came back to her and said, "Look, we've thought about this thing, and we want you to come home. You're only 17. I'll tell you what, we can make a deal here. You can study with Jehovah's Witnesses. Just don't go to those meetings, okay?" And she said, "You made your decision. I made mine." She's now our sister. She was baptized this spring and doing well in the truth. She stuck with it. And that was a very brave thing to do. It was hard for her to leave her home. She still wasn't finished school. She had to finish her high school away from home. And so maybe some of you can remember what you've gone through with your relatives, and that was very brave of you. Or maybe you remember your first talk in the Theocratic Ministry School. Was that a brave thing to do? Or maybe you're still finding it very nerve-wracking to give a talk in the school. But you've weathered it, and you get up here and you do it. And that's brave. One fellow, when he gave his first talk, he got up on the platform and he grabbed a hold of the lectern and he stood there for 5 minutes. And they had to come and peel his hands off and lead him off the platform. So the second time he figured, well, he'll really get himself even more prepared. And when he got up on the platform, he came up behind the lectern and he simply fainted over backwards. Now, who would have blamed him if he said, "That's it, I give up"? But you know what? He persevered. He was courageous. The next time he got up there, he went all the way through his talk. Except I guess he didn't hear his counsel because he was outside throwing up. But that's a brave thing to do. And you know what? Today, that young man is a district convention speaker. So the courage paid off. And we're like that, aren't we? That's how we are. We do courageous things every day. And that makes us like Jonah, doesn't it? And it's good to be brave. It is. It's very good to be brave. I mean, just think of the scene in heaven when Jehovah saw Jonah running away and he was saying, "Hey, you guys, come here, look at this. He's trying to get away. Now look at, one of you go get a fish, another one get a storm going here. I'll get them to throw him off the ship, and I'll get the fish to swallow him, and we'll give him a ride for a day or two, maybe 3, and see if he's ready to go to Nineveh." You see, it's good to be brave, isn't it? Because you never know what Jehovah may decide to do to us if we try to run away from an assignment. Does Jehovah have a sense of humor? I think he does. Yeah. Can a man live inside a fish? Can he really? Did you know that in a 14-foot shark, they found 2 7-foot sharks whole? Yeah. One man was found after 24 hours, still alive. They say he was very white when he came out. Apparently the stomach acid really bleached his skin bad. But he was alive. And Jonah? How did he survive 3 days in the belly of a fish? Well, it was because of Jehovah, wasn't it? Jehovah's Spirit. And that tells us something about Jehovah, that no matter where we go, you can't even go to the bottom of the ocean and not be able to be touched by Jehovah's Spirit, for Jehovah to assist us and help us. So when the Bible says, the God of peace will equip you with every good thing to do his will, where can we ever go away from that? But it's good at this point to understand something about Jehovah. You see, with Jonah back on dry land, Jehovah didn't go back to Jonah and say, "You know what, Jonah, I think I made a mistake. Look, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'll get somebody else to do this." If you turn to Jonah chapter 3 and verse 1, look at what it says there. Then the word of Jehovah occurred to Jonah the second time, saying, Get up, go to Nineveh, the great city, and proclaim to her the proclamation that I am speaking to you. That experience cost Jonah a lot of time, a lot of money, because he paid his own fare to get on that ship. It probably cost him a lot of acid-bleached skin, a ride in a fish, and he still had to go and do it anyways. Tells us something about Jehovah, doesn't it? You see, brothers, Jehovah expects us to do what's right, even though we don't always feel like it. Doesn't he? And let's face it, we don't always feel like doing the things that we should. You know, sometimes parents are like that too. They feel, well, because their children don't want to do things spiritually, that they say, well, I don't want to force them. They'll just hate it if I force them. And so maybe in the family study, what will happen is the kids try to sabotage the study. They start to fight with one another, or maybe they play dumb. So what's God's name? I don't know. From a 12-year-old, it's hard to take, isn't it? But sometimes they do that. They sabotage the study for whatever reason it happens, and the parents will sometimes throw up their hands and say, what's the sense of forcing them? But you see, Jehovah expects us to do what's right, even though we don't always feel like it. I mean, after all, if you had a brand new car, and your son or daughter took a sharp nail and started at the back fender of your brand new car, and took that and ran it all the way down to the headlight, you'd probably say, well, if he thinks that's wrong, he'll probably go out and get some money and fix my car for me. Otherwise, what are you going to do? Is that how you'd react? Probably not. So you see, it's good for us to remember that, brothers, that Jehovah expects us to do what's right, even though we don't always feel like it. One 16-year-old had decided that it was time for him to make his own decisions. And so he said to his dad, look, Dad, I'm 16 now. I'm going to make my own decisions. So Dad said, okay. So next Saturday rolls around and Dad says, come on, it's time for service. You coming out with us? And he says, look, I'm making my own decisions now. I'm not going today. Next Saturday rolls around and Dad says, it's Saturday. Were you coming out in service? Look, Dad, I told you I'm making my own decisions. Well, a third Saturday rolls around. Dad comes into his bedroom, throws back the covers, takes the boy, throws him out on the floor, says, get up, it's time to go in service. And, of course, the son's real mad. And he says, look, I'm making my own decisions now. And Dad says, yes, you've been making your own decisions for 3 weeks. And you haven't made one right one yet. So now I'm taking over, and you're going out in service. And that young man's in full-time service today. And he kind of laughs about it. And it didn't hurt him a bit. So it's good for us to keep that in mind, that Jehovah wants us to do what's right. And if we have to force ourselves a little bit, well, that's okay. Jonah did too. And after all, we're a lot like Jonah, aren't we? We're like Jonah in so many ways. And like him, we have to remind ourselves that Jehovah will not ever give us an assignment and abandon us to it. He'll always provide His Holy Spirit and His organization and the means with which to accomplish that. And like Jonah, all of us are very brave people. It's just sometimes we have to forget, or we do forget about the fact that Jehovah will always equip us to do His will. And we sometimes have to deal with our imperfections, and it can be a bit of a struggle. But generally speaking, we're very brave people. And of course, it's good to remember that Jehovah, yes, does expect us to do what's right. After all, just look at the results. In Jonah chapter 4 and verse 11, notice what happened because Jonah decided to follow through on this assignment. Jehovah's speaking here, and he says, and for my part, ought I not to feel sorry for Nineveh, the great city, in which there exists more than 120,000 men who do not know at all the difference between their right hand and their left? You see, 120,000 men changed their viewpoint. 120,000. And history shows us that Assyrian aggression diminished during that period of time. They were no longer the bloodthirsty people they had once been. because Jonah was successful. Because Jehovah knew what he was doing. And Jehovah knows today that the more we get involved in the avenues of service that he's promoting through his organization, the happier we are and the more success we have in our ministry. Some of you may be familiar with Sister Nancy Ewan. Do you remember her? 20 years in prison in China. Sister Ewan is now in California. Last year alone, she started 17 Bible studies by street witnessing. 17 Bible studies. She got their names and phone numbers and followed up on that. So it works, brothers, you see. It's almost as if Jehovah knew what he was doing when he got us involved in this. So this week we're going to promote those avenues of service once again. We want to be busy in the ministry. We're looking forward to having an opportunity to work with you. Tomorrow morning, Wednesday, we're going to have a full day. We have field service at 9 o'clock and 1:15. And for those of you who work during the day, 6:45 field service arrangement. And you know, just as we were talking about Saturday service, evening witnessing is absolutely the most productive. Great time to be out in service. So we hope to see all the elders and ministerial servants out tomorrow night. That's not just for the elders and ministerial servants, though. On Thursday, we'll have field service at 9 o'clock and 1:15. We'll have the elders and ministerial servants meeting at 7 o'clock. On Friday, again, field service at 9 o'clock and 1:15. And Friday evening, we're going to talk about spreading the fragrant knowledge of God in every place. As well, we're going to have a little bit of a condensed book study, 45 minutes. And then we're going to talk about, do you walk by faith or by sight? So you can think about that through the week. On Saturday, we'll have field service at 9:15. And you know, brothers, if you are a person that kind of has a 12 o'clock schedule, what you can do to overcome that so you can work through lunch is bring along a snack, and you'll make it. And, the first time that we convinced the congregation to do that, we had 2 Bible studies started that Saturday morning. And one of the Bible studies, do you know when it's being conducted? Saturday noon, because it's the only time they can get the person home. So it's a good time to be in service. At 1 o'clock, we're going to have a meeting for those who are interested in full-time service. 20 minutes here in the Kingdom Hall. Then we'll have a field service arrangement following that. We also have, at 2 o'clock, a scheduled meeting for the regular and special pioneers. Now, if that's not going to work for you, please see me right after the meeting so that we can make other arrangements. But if that works, that's great. So we'll plan for 2 o'clock. Sunday, we have field service at 9:30. I guess I never checked. Where's the field service arrangement from, Brother? It's here in the Kingdom Hall, Brother Wheeler? Okay. So 9:30 on Sunday morning. And then you want to invite people to the public talk, because the public talk is really designed for those people who are newly interested. It's trust in Jehovah's saving power. So I think they'll look forward to hearing that. So we have a busy week, and we're certainly going to look forward to your participation in that. At this point, though, what we'd like you to do is turn to Song 181 and join us in the Kingdom Song, which is Song 181. So if you're able, would you like to stand as we sing that song together? And Brother Wheeler, could we ask you to close our meeting with prayer, please?